All right, hey everyone. I am back today with Patrick Bove. And if you don't know who Patrick is, then you obviously haven't been around newsletters, you haven't been around Agora, you haven't been around MarketWise, you haven't been around FinPub that much, because Patrick is has been consistently one of the top copy chiefs in the industry. For anyone who doesn't know, first over at your Stansberry, you wrote a ton of great promos, classic promos yourself. You've chiefed amazing teams. You're on a year ago. We had a great conversation, and since then a lot's changed. Awesome to have you back, man.
It's great to be back, John. I know a ton's changed for me, a ton's changed for the market. So I'm excited to be here just to talk through it all, man. Like help us get on the right foot.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So it's been a year roughly. Um the when last we were talking, we were kind of talking bear markets. Um
Mhm.
how do you see the kind of like how do you see this the from a promotional standpoint and kind of the industry this last year? How did you see it kind of evolve from your vantage point?
It was pretty bullish. It was the outcome was way more bullish than I had anticipated. But the nice thing about working in this industry is that if you have a viewpoint, you could be early, you could be wrong, you could be early, you can be right. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. But if you're paying attention to what's selling and you're not trying to force something on the market, you tend to do all right. So I think I'm biased towards the downside only because I think things have just gone bonkers for so long. And I have this natural, I love also like writing in bear markets. Not that
I
I would
remember
wish one
that.
on, I won't wish one on us, don't worry. But if it happens, then I feel like I have an edge. So I'm not going to freeze up in a bear market. So kind of like honey badger, honey badger don't care. um, yeah. So yeah, that was the outlook then. But sometimes the market will continue longer than it should, or you think it will. But that's reality, right? That's in the moment, and you're selling in that moment. So you have to stay wedded to what the customer's beliefs are. And so I could have a belief and act a certain way with my portfolio um, over the long term, but in the short
Mhm.
term, I could act entirely different in our business because you can't sell a bearish idea in the middle of a bullish market. You could test and find out where you are,
Right.
where the line is, what the interest is, but it could be a huge waste of time, which is the greatest opportunity cost of all. That's the worst
Yeah.
possible thing you could do is waste time on an idea that doesn't make sense. Because then, even if the market does turn in your favor later on, the copy might not fit. You have to write the whole darn thing over again. So I kind of have two minds on it. I have my own view about where the market's going, just as a handicapper slash investor myself, and then I have my real world spectacles for when I'm writing copy, sitting down, trying to meet the market where it is.
Yeah, yeah. And it's almost like I almost think of like writing promo in FinPub is a little bit like trading, um, where it's like you're trying to catch short to medium term trends, and you really can't. Like you can have a long term perspective, but like that doesn't affect today's trade.
Yeah,
Um,
and sometimes it works in your favor. It just you can't control the market, right? Nobody can.
mhm.
So, but this the promo that I just wrote for Paradigm, which is off to a huge start. Like it's the call it the American Birthright. It's the $150 trillion trust fund promo that folks might have seen on the internet. It's off to a great start. Knock on wood. Never want to toot my own horn about anything, especially in advance. But it's a good start, and it was a risk writing it because, excuse me, it's essentially a commodities promo, right?
Right.
At a time where AI and crypto were hot. I started working on this last year, and this is about like this is a bit on handicapping the markets and looking forward. I just had a sense that this is going to turn, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and I was willing
Wow.
to bet my time on this because gold was inching up. You could see the big picture with China withdrawing these commodities from the U.S., pulling back. You knew as soon as Trump won that he was going to smooth the way in his second term and help unlock some of these minerals that have been trapped for decades, if not centuries. So it just seemed like a safer bet to me than it might have to the average copywriter. I took a chance on it, and man, it could have gone the wrong way. It could have gone if gold crashed and sentiment cratered. There's no amount of good copy that's going to sell it. It doesn't matter who
Mhm.
you are. But if the market does break your way, it feels like a wonderful, like a tailwind, right? It gives you a
Right.
chance. And so the market gave me a chance. And so this happened to line up. And it's also a departure for Jim Rickards, who this is written for. He's typically more of a bearish themed analyst. I don't think he's a perma bear, but all of his biggest promos essentially the past several years have been bearish. So it was a risk in terms
Mhm.
of tone for him. Like how do you write for this incredibly accomplished, half century experience in DC kind of guru
Right.
who's cut his teeth with bear stories. But you're flipping bullish under a Trump administration. It
Hmm.
wasn't exactly clear cut, but I'm glad it appears to be working. I don't want to jinx it, but yeah, this looking forward is a risk as a copywriter,
Yeah.
and it's often safer just to stay with what's working, and that's what a lot of people do. I
Hmm.
just can't do that because I just get sick to my stomach. Honestly, I can't. I don't want to write another AI promo until something really magical does happen in AI. And I know that's crazy to say because it seems like something magical happens every day, but in a way that makes it less special and overwhelming. So you almost need a high watermark in something. You need a moment to come along that's like the Chat GPT moment,
Right.
and we're all sort of waiting for that. And I just personally don't have any interest in writing about AI until that happens, or until I can connect the dots in a way that paints the picture of what's happening. But
Right.
yeah, yeah. So it's this. That's a bit of like what goes on inside my head. I just gave you a window of babble into what goes on inside my head when I'm thinking about this stuff. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, it is. It's very interesting to me because a few things, right? When listening to you talk, the one of the things I think about is that you started this last year, and we did end the end of the year very bullish. Commodities as a bullish idea is not something we see much anymore. Rickards and commodity, right? I mean, just like we don't see
Yeah,
too much of it, right? So, but
right.
Rickards, like you said, tended to have a lot of big bearish promos. He's kind of known as being the gold guy. Commodities traditionally was also kind of one of those things that you would see as kind of like, hey, stocks go down, commodities might go up. And so it is, even on the profit side, there is like a bearish element to it. And to me,
Mhm.
this is interesting because like we've been tracking with all the folks in FMS Pro Discord and at the summit, like the first 3 weeks of the year, the end of 2024, banner. I mean, like people were having some of the best years they've ever had. And then like around the last week of January, kind of sentiment did drop. Back end sales were getting more difficult for a lot of folks. We're seeing on the front end a little bit more like, I won't say it's bad or anything. It's just it's more blah than it
Mhm.
was, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and
because so many
then
things that
yeah,
yeah, so many
go.
things happen. That's the thing. Like when what you're excited about happening, it's sort of like being a kid on Christmas, right?
Mhm.
You look forward to Christmas, or you look forward to your birthday, whatever the heck holiday you're looking forward to, and then it gets there, and there's this high, and then does it meet your expectation or exceed it? Does it fall beneath your expectation? And then towards the end of the day, you feel down
Mhm.
because it already happened, and you have to wait a whole nother year for it to happen again, or you don't know when it's going to happen again in terms of a bull market. So I think that's the psychology that plays out among our investors and among our copy teams. Like, you had the Bitcoin reserve to point to, and an idea like that is way more exciting when it's in the future than when it actually happens. There's almost no
Mhm.
way the reality of a Bitcoin reserve could ever measure up to what you think it could be in the weeks or months leading up to it. And then that's what happened. I think that happens in a lot of different ways. And then copywriters run out of steam. The market kind of runs out of direction, and you're left kind of sitting out there adrift at sea with no breeze. Like just wondering when the next one's going to kick up.
Yeah. And the fact that you're doing a commodities promo here, um, it how would I put it? Commodities used to be like a mainstay of the industry. Like it
Oh
used to
yeah.
be like right down the middle was kind of commodity investing, um, and it was a very like robust part of the industry. Then over like the last 10 years, especially during the big bull markets, you had crypto, you have all this stuff. Commodities became it's become a smaller part of the industry. It's become less or harder to sell. And so other than like Jim Rickards, we don't see a lot of big commodity gurus that have had a lot of success. And so it's just a very interesting dynamic to me. And I do wonder if, you think of all these things, you have technological advances. We have a completely changing global security order that's going to affect supply chains. It's going to have effects on commodity chains. Like, are we maybe going to start to see kind of a return to some of those more almost like romantic themes of FinPub? Uh, that,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, what do you think on that? Like,
I sure hope so. That's what I'm trying to lean into it because I miss writing for those themes. And when I
mhm,
came into the business, you're right. I mean, there was entire wings of these groups that were devoted to commodities, and it was one of the best selling, publications you could possibly have, whether it was oil or gold or silver or whatever. Even uranium had its moment. And it's a lot of fun, and and there's a romance to it for sure. And it's real world stuff, in a world that's driven by nothing like fake paper money and fake experts and governments that don't know what the heck they're doing. Like, this is something to hold on to. So there is a romance to it, and there is an appeal to it. But the downside of it is it's not proprietary, right? You're never going to have the singularity or the specificity of an NVIDIA chip in
Hmm.
gold, because gold is a generic element that theoretically anybody could find. Some people stumble over it in the stream and pluck a nugget out of the earth, and it can't really compete in a world where specificity is demanded in terms of like, this is new, this is special, this is different. Well, gold and silver are never new, special, and different.
Yeah.
That's part of their appeal. But in a world full of shiny objects and shiny object hunters, they often take a back seat. And so I knew in working on this theme with Jim, like, he was amazing to work with, had so many insights, and his whole life story just is incredible. But I knew working with him that we couldn't just come at this directly, no matter how much we wanted to. There's just not a chance.
Hmm.
It had to be big, political, emotional theme to get into this story, and we had to make it appeal to a broader audience that doesn't just call out to folks who are already interested in commodities, because they're not a big enough audience.
Hmm.
So that's part of the challenge when you're writing for these themes. It's just like casting a wide net on a subject that's not necessarily, I mean, it is broad. I mean, I could contradict myself. Commodities are in a way broad. If you consider the fact they go into everything with an on switch, okay, they're broad, but they don't really have a broad audience. They don't have fans. Like, there's nobody asking the CEO of Newmont to sign their bra, like the way
Right.
that Nvidia's CEO is literally autographing women's, chests and bras, like at their conferences. That's how excited people are about AI. It's nuts. He's like a rock star. You're never going to see that in the mining business.
Right.
Or maybe we will. If we do, it'll be a sign of the top.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, that's why it's such a huge divide when you're writing for it. And crypto, I think we talked about this in the past. When crypto came along, it also kind of broke investors' brains in terms of their expectations of what's possible. Like, how much money can you make in a short period of time? Well, yeah, with crypto, you could have made a ton more than anything else if
Right.
you bought the right ones at the right time. So it had a way of exciting people, but making everything else seem incredibly tame. It's sort of
Right.
like, I could think of a million politically incorrect examples. I probably won't share what that means. But you know what I mean. It's sort of just like, or here's a safe one. You walk into a Golden Corral buffet, which is like the bottom, the dregs, and somehow, some way, there's like a prime choice aged like ribeye sitting there, and your steak, right? And you see it there, and
Hmm.
that's $100 piece of steak next to the schlock, that's been fed through a machine. Like, you could spot it. It
Right.
stands out. So that's
Yeah.
that's that that's comparative to what happens in our business sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example or analogy. So let's talk a little bit about how you changed. So when we last talked, you weren't and you're doing what you're doing now, which is you've actually formed a copy agency that kind of works inside of Agora for Agora companies, right?
Yeah, this was Joe Schrieffer's genius idea. Like, it was not my idea. I recognized its brilliance immediately because it was just what I wanted and needed. And I love the idea of working back at Agora. I want to make Agora great again, so to speak. Like, Agora is not anywhere near its heyday levels right now, but man, we're gonna get there. I know it. And what Bill and Mark did for this business and everybody else in it, like, to help grow it, is so special to me because I got my start there, and I desperately want them back on top. I desperately want them to be thriving, successful business with lots of great competition between the affiliates. And so this was a chance to step back into the fold and write for anybody I wanted to, and bring some of my best copywriters from back at Legacy, and we could write for anybody across the business, which is appealing because if one thing goes wrong, if you go through what I went through at Legacy, where everything's going so well, and then the business is completely dismantled, um, you realize how little control you have. No matter what kind of a job you do, there could always be some bowling ball that comes and knocks the pins down, and then you have to start all over again. Well,
Hmm.
the beauty of this new scenario is that it's sort of decentralized. We can write for any group. So um, if one group is struggling, like, well, we could be a hero and try to jump in and help if we feel passionately, or we could just follow the money and work for the ones that are thriving, and insert ourselves in there and try to help them succeed even more. So it was an easy pitch to my guys who joined the team. There's 6 of us now, and plus me, and we're having a great time, and we're just getting, diving into it. And it's a challenge though, trying to get to know so many different people and so many different businesses. But we knew that going in. It's just that's the learning curve for us has been, instead of learning one set of gurus, if you're inside one business as an employee,
Right.
multiply that by three, multiply all the marketers by three, all the copy chiefs, everybody in between. So it's a lot of putting faces to names and figure out who does what, but we're all moving past that now. And I'm feeling really good about it. I'm feeling great about it.
Yeah.
And Agora is such a wonderful learning laboratory. It's always been that way. With the Zambezi report that comes out every
Hmm.
day, there's a lot of sharing that goes on within that community. You can't really hoard ideas because it's so obvious when something becomes successful. So I feel like they're primely positioned to grow, and there's lots of talent coming into Agora now too. So it feels like old school Agora. It feels like the place to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That kind of like entrepreneurial kind of feel was always one of the strengths of the that culture and ecosystem. Um,
Mhm.
and so like hearing that's like that aspect of it is really like kind of being leveraged here with like having a group of really just like blockbuster copywriters being able to kind of hunt projects across the business and
Mm.
find opportunities is seems like a perfect fit for their model, and really just really exciting as a copywriter to be able to like say, yeah, I don't want to do that project right now. Like this is an idea that I have. This is somebody that it fits with, or I love what he's doing for today, but I don't want to get married to that guy, maybe because you know there's all kinds of
Right.
reasons
You don't
not to, from a
you
creative
don't know. And,
standpoint, professional, business, whatever. Yeah.
and speaking of commodities, like the most frustrating thing about commodities is they're the most they lead the most well, commodity gurus tend to lead the most romantic newsletter lives, right? And they're highly volatile. They're fascinating. They're some of the best writers and thinkers in the business,
Hmm.
but they just blow off and disappear for any reason. They're so it's a trend. It's an inside joke for me in the business. I've seen so many amazingly talented commodity gurus just blow off. I mean, everybody from Doug Casey, like but he doesn't need the money. Like everybody
Right.
loves Doug Casey. You got to love Doug Casey. He's the icon. He's on the Mount Rushmore, but you can't write for him now. And there's guys like EB Tucker, who's amazing. Like he has his own newsletter on Substack now. He's doing his own thing. And
Hmm.
it's just like down the line, like you just keep going down the line of all these great commodity gurus. And yeah, it's nice to be in a position like we are at Agora because we could take our pick from across all the businesses. If one guy
Hmm.
happens to leave, it doesn't blow up the business, it doesn't blow up our agency. So I like that a
Yeah.
lot. That's been a lot of fun. I did have I know last time we talked, we did talk about ideas and what's working or not. I got some of that up my sleeve too. I know
Yeah.
that when we talk about commodities, I'm detecting a lot of eye rolls. I think it might be a lot of guys just don't. Not from you, John, but I can feel it. I can feel it from the audience out there. I'm sensing it. I'm sensing it saying like I'll go. It's like that old Scooby Doo line. I'll go first after you. I'll go
Right.
first
Right.
after you. You be the first one in the door that gets shot, Patrick. Fine. Okay, I'll do it. I'll take it on. Uh, but yeah, I have plenty of that to talk about too.
Yeah. What else? So, what other themes are out there that you see are working right now?
So okay,
Um,
obviously, you know, tech and AI has been perennial with crypto, but I mean, it's that what's the most important thing to know about it is like meeting the market where they are, like their level of sophistication. And I see a lot of writers coming in who are just writing to an audience that doesn't exist. They're writing for a time that doesn't exist. And I think certain events that occur, whether it's something like the launch of Chat GPT or it's something like the presidential election, they can completely flip a market and they could have a drastic effect on what works and what doesn't. Like so, Trump's election railroaded a whole bunch of packages. They couldn't work. That was it, and you just have to deal with it, and you have to figure out, well, can we pivot or not? Maybe not. But the problem I see in a lot of copy out there for AI and crypto is that it's sort of just like Me Too derivative copy, and it's focused on next NVIDIA type stuff, which can work. Some of it, if it's executed well, can work, but it just gets tired. It gets so tired. I mean, our readers get exposed to so many of these messages. And I think sometimes the challenge is remembering that fact and then trying to serve up something that's really specific and unique. So I think the key thing to understand is like where the reader's head's at, of course, and what they've already seen, and connecting the dots in a way that's fascinating that tells the next story, the next chapter in the story of tech, of AI,
mhm.
or crypto. So that's been the challenge, but they are some of the safest themes to write about.
Mhm.
It's just that, like I said a moment ago, you wouldn't want to be writing a Bitcoin or crypto reserve promo now. I think that's crazy. I think it's just It's already happened and it was a nothing burger, and maybe it'll be something great. Maybe they'll add to it and find a way to make it what it should be. But it's sort of already run its course. Like that story has run
Right.
its course, and it would have to take a different twist or turn to be exciting. Uh, so then there's of course the Trump Musk axis there. So I mean, there's a lot of low hanging fruit after the election, of course. Like he's going to do this, he's
Hmm.
going to do that. His first executive order, of course, that's smart stuff to write. Um, but then the election happens and the inauguration happens, and they're in the real world, and it becomes much harder to and talk about a moving target. There's so much coming out of that office. It's very
Yeah.
difficult for copywriters to keep up. And Musk is moving with such frantic speed. It's hard to keep up with him as well. This whole Doge story, for instance, like
Hmm.
so many live themes are embedded in that Doge
Right.
kind of a storyline, but copywriters are struggling to keep up. And because the minute you write something like as a prediction, they go out and actually do it. And then what? So, so you
And
got
then
to start over.
that's Matt Paulson, who's the founder of MarketBeat at FMS. He talked about a promo, and he was like, and then the problem with that promo is that the prediction came true, and so it was over. And it's like that's exactly the
Yeah,
kind of thing that happens with the forecast promo if it actually is very timely and correct. Is well, okay, it happened, it's done.
it's
Um,
so true. And that's why what I've been telling my guys lately is that, especially the macro guys, like if you're looking for something to write, I'm calling it like, I don't know if this has been used before, John, but I'm calling it meta macro. Like meta macro is where you should be right now. Like talking about the big picture. Um, so for instance, like what I mean by that is talking about finding the hidden meaning in all these events that are happening today, or finding or exploring the feeling it creates and the effects it creates on the markets. Like that's not going to be out of date. That's
mhm.
not going to go away. And I think a lot of guys are frustrated because they come into the business and they're trying to write something. And I thought of this little example I was going to share with you. I don't know if this makes sense or not. I like to tell, I've spent all these stories to try to make it real. Um, Imagine if you walked into the first party ever on Earth, if there'd never been a party before, and you walk into this party and you're in the room and it's just like a regular party, like what we know today. Like there's beer in the fridge, there's music on, there's maybe a band and people are mingling, and there's a bunch of like finger foods and Tostitos or whatever, and maybe there's a game on or there's whatever, something. It's just a normal party. If nobody had ever had that experience before, you could simply just walk into that room and comment on what you see, what's obvious, and it would be novel, it'd be interesting, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh wow, they got like chips and dip. Oh my God, like it's amazing. Like that's sort of like how it is when you're writing about a new trend and there's low-hanging fruit. Like you don't have to work that hard, and you shouldn't.
Right.
You just talk about what you see, and you can just have a little fun on the surface, like skittering along the surface. But we're actually in the weirdest party ever right now. Like this is like, and people are walking into this weirdest party where there's a band playing on the ceiling, and there's like, the host is walking around with a punch bowl in their head filled with goldfish, and and there's people dancing on the bottom of the pool like upside down, and like it's all this crazy stuff going on, and
Hmm.
the copywriters are walking into that environment talking about and describing it like a normal party, right?
Right.
They're just saying like, oh man, like look at these chips and dip, and oh, like that guy over there, like he's like, is he homeless, like what are you like, they're talking about like they're talking about super service level stuff, and they would just walked into this crazy party and treating it like it's just a generic, like, and that only works when it's the first party ever. It only works when it's like the first rounds of some new thing that you're writing about. So I think that's the biggest challenge for copywriters right now is
Hmm.
just stepping back, zooming out, just thinking about like what does this really mean? Not just what do I see, but what does it really mean? Because if you write about just what's in the headlines, you end up writing a crypto reserve promo,
Right. Yeah.
or you end up writing a next Nvidia promo, or you just end up just you're constantly chasing, like you're never going to get ahead of the market. And I think the other part of that is just like this looseness or tightness of spirit of what you're writing. Like you don't have to be so tight. You don't have to like be so specific and pin yourself down to a prediction that's crystal clear. It's really just about the effect of what's coming. You can use your imagination and paint a picture of how whatever seems to be happening now is going to evolve and affect the markets and affect
Hmm.
civilization in the
Right.
future. And and the market will forgive you for that if it's authentic to what their actual experience is and what their feelings are in the moment. So I think there's just like at a time like this, the dumbest thing to do is write on the nose, like write something like punchy on the nose. It's crazy because it's all the low hanging fruit is gone, and nobody, and it seems outdated in a way too
Right.
because the market's moving too fast. It's risky, right? It's sort of like your prediction that got
Right,
actually
right.
came to be. You're right. I talk about being right in the worst way possible. You write a
Yeah,
promo that's pending, and then it happens, and then you're screwed, and you're trying to scramble and figure out how to rewrite. So I
yeah.
think I don't know if that, I don't know. I haven't refined this message very well, but I don't know if that makes perfect sense. But
No,
it's just like a looseness of spirit.
I do, and I like the idea of like kind of like the meta macro in a sense. So, in November, this was what 2 days past the election. I had a conference down in Miami, and we had one of the guys that was on one of the panels was Glenn. He was the former head of U.S. News for the Wall Street Journal, and we were just afterwards, sitting. A bunch of us were sitting out on the patio, smoking cigars and drinking and talking. And he said, we're, it was like grilling him for like, what are your big ideas about like where the country is and things like that. And he's like, and this is before Doge or any Doja came out or anything like that happened. And he's like, I'm looking at this and I think you're missing the point if you think this is the second Trump presidency. I say this is the first Musk presidency, and that this is going to be like a part of our politics going forward for quite some time now. And like that to me is like, okay, you can talk about all those AI and Doge stories and all the other things that are related to Musk, but inside of that meta idea, which has longer legs, that's a more, to me as just personally, like, I find that kind of idea fascinating. Just like I
Hmm.
find the idea of the changing global security order fascinating, right? Like there is phenomenal people out there like Sarah Payne, she's a academic at the Naval War College, and she's talking about the difference between, look at a maritime power like what the US has been for the last 60 70 years versus a continental power like the US used to be, or like Russia and China is. And then are we looking at shifting to a continental power? Because talking about threatening Canada, even like slightly in Mexico, like that, this suggests a strategic move toward the continental power, which is such a dramatic change of what the world is, that if you go in that direction, the amount of stories and how that's going to impact everything, that's not, and this is not tech related, right? There was tech stories in it, but it's a meta idea, a big idea about the world. And to me, that kind of like there's a romance to like that big macro story, the geopolitical story that we don't even approach anymore because like so much of the industry's moved to trading versus macro even. So even within the macro stories, there's fewer people total. But um
Yeah. Oh, those are fascinating themes. I mean, I'm with you on that. And I think those are worth working on. I think it's just a question of, does it match up with the right guru, and then what part of the story do you focus on? And
right.
I was actually on a call with Porter on a research project, and he brought up something very interesting. He brought up this idea of how the Ukrainians had taken down or taken out a Russian warship with a store-bought drone. And I'd never read that
Mm-hmm.
story myself, but when the moment he said it, I thought, wow. I mean, you think, well, it's asymmetric warfare, probably could link that to asymmetrical returns, which would be kind of cool. And then what does it really mean for the global order? Like, what does it mean about how we project power and what the future is going to look like? What does quote unquote safety and stability even look like? And what is the cost of it? And are we going to go through a period of time where those two are at odds, the old world and the new world, and it's really ugly and messy? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Could that time period be given a name? Absolutely. I mean, there's that fourth
Yeah.
turning right there again. So it's like
Yeah.
there's a or some variation of that. And then the move to take Canada or Greenland, which is like still it's a little chuckle, but it's not a 0% chance, not a zero, and it's not 100% chance, obviously either. But
Right.
it if we're in an area where the lines of the map could possibly be redrawn, then people need to adjust their focus and open up and loosen their minds up a little bit. That there's that concept. One of my favorite concepts is that of the Overton window, which is sort of
Mm-hmm.
that phrase that's used to describe what is considered possible or probable by the general public or by your audience in general. And if the window is shut or barely open, it just means that audience is not willing to consider many different ideas or much deviation from the present. If it's wide open or blown open, then that means
Mm-hmm.
that, wow, it seems like anything is possible, anything can happen. Holy crap, I have to be ready for anything. And that's sort of where we are now. We're in this world of the Overton window is wide open. It's maybe been busted out of its, sockets there, and it's
Yeah.
flapping in the breeze. And a lot of people would prefer just to focus on the same old because it feels safe and convenient, but they're making a huge mistake, whether it's investors or copywriters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something uh, that the ideas you're talking about and you bring up, they appeal to me because they're in line with this. Like they're
Hmm.
exploring areas of radical change taking place in the world today. And where there's radical change, there's radical profits to be had. It goes without saying. Like you don't even have to prove that. That's just the truth. Of course, you could prove it. I could easily dig up
Right.
examples, but and I would if I was writing it. But yes, I mean that's like nobody should be afraid about writing about those. Now the thing is, it just can't be political red meat. Like you wouldn't do that,
Right.
say rah rah or USA, like we're growing bigger every day. You're not going to say that. So you're going to tell
Right.
the story. Well, what the heck does that mean for the reader? What does it mean for the markets? What does it mean for like geopolitical tensions?
Hmm.
There's so much wrapped up in that. What does it mean for the currency? Uh, there's infinite levels and layers you can explore. But
Yeah.
man, I just love that you're into those ideas because
Oh
that's to
yeah.
me that's a great spot to be digging around.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I love like seeing how like even trading ETFs in this environment, right? Like the DAX has been up like straight up since, the beginning of the year, and like European defense, and like, you're not selling the stocks in the US. It's hard to sell, like invest in international stocks, but like
Mm.
there's plenty of ETFs at this point. I mean, you can, but like just like people are much more comfortable buying ETFs, and like ETFs on these plays are really interesting. And there's just so much meat. That's why, I keep saying like this is a newsletter writer's market. Like somebody who's really into like ideas and like what's happening in the economy and how it impacts investments, like not just the trading. Like this is like, I don't know, it's like it could be like a boom time just in terms of the ideas. There's so many big fundamental things that are changing that like to talk about. And that's not to discount the value of having like a trading business and things like that. It's just that this is to me a unique feature of the current time that we're in, is that for better or for worse, a lot of stuff's changing, and we're gonna all feel the changes. And
Uh-huh.
that's from an investment and promo standpoint, like
and that's
interesting
and that's
field.
that creates two emotions. That creates excitement and discomfort, massive
Mm-hmm.
discomfort. And it's unexpressed because you can't, like, everybody's so caught up in this silly small talk. Nobody's talking about it, and because they're afraid to talk about it because they don't want to picture it, they don't know what to do. But there's an unmet need. The reader has an unmet need for somebody to explain to them that they're not crazy and that what they're seeing is really happening. In fact, it may be worse or better than what they think, depending on what the story is, and how there's a simple way to understand what's happening and protect yourself and profit. This is a
Mm-hmm.
classic newsletter architecture,
Yeah.
but it's not reinventing the wheel. It's really, but that's, to me, that's the gusher that you want to tap as a copywriter. That well of emotion that's unexpressed, unmet, unmet needs, and who's not meeting it? Well, society and mainstream media, and but that they're causing people pain, or if whether it's FOMO or there's just pure
Right.
fear and dreading the future. If it came to AI, like they need somebody to connect the dots for them, or at least to confirm that they're not crazy and that what they're seeing is true. And I think if you can find a way to do that in a unique way as a copywriter, you're golden. Like you got half the battle right there.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just got to hope you have the right. Of course, you need the right product and the right editor to
Right.
sell. You can't conjure that up out of thin air, but yeah, if you got the right solution on, then you're done. You're pretty much home free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's I know when you were saying that you see a lot of kind of just like a little bit half-assed copied copy out there. Like this is just another thing that Matt Paulson had said. He was talking about how because on the acquisition side, working with large publishers, you have groups like MarketBeat, you have It's Today, you have other like affiliate kind of CPA models. They're so good anymore that on the first day or so that an offer goes out to them that's working, they're going to show it to like a million people like
Mhm.
that. And so the life cycle of those ideas has shortened because they're so good at getting it out to everybody and getting it in their face from so many different angles, so quickly at scale,
Mm.
that like if you're copying other ideas, like those ideas are just like, you have diminishing returns on kind of just that kind of half-assed, I'm going to copy. And there's people, I mean, this isn't going to sound bad, I don't mean it badly, but I'm like, there are plenty of both writers and kind of people in the publishing business who most of their career is essentially like, I'm going to just wait till somebody else comes up with an idea and then I'm going to write a version of that. And that's what they do. And
Oh yeah.
it was a lot less of a problem, when you had a longer timeline. But faster, faster timelines mean less time for ideas to work. Time to market is more and more important. um I don't know how, if you guys have seen like a big shift in using AI to speed up your promo process, but I
Mm.
think that's a huge thing that like people need to be thinking about too.
Oh,
um
I love it. Yeah, you're right. I mean, because at some point, I mean, it's going to speed up the knockoffs for sure, right? You'll be able to just upload any promo in there and just say like, give me something that sounds like this, but it's like 90% different, or whatever it has to
right,
be.
right.
And I don't know what the prompt will be, but that'll be sort of the nature of the prompt, and it'll spit out something that's decent. And but the thing is, then we won't need those copywriters anymore. This one's like,
Right.
I'll just knock myself off over and over again and just have fresh leads. Like, why would we need some B or C level copywriters to do it? Um, so that's like those guys are really just seeding their own demise if they're not moving up the ladder, moving up the food chain. I think that's what every copywriter should be focused on today. Like, it's a difficult time to, if you're new and breaking in, if unless you're superiorly talented. If you have a great talent and great desire, you can make it in this business 100%. But it's not as easy or forgiving as it once was, and you don't have as much time necessarily. But for as far as AI goes, man, I use it every day. I love it. I love it. I love it. Like I've used it to write subheads when I'm tired and don't want to write subheads, and I'll refine them. I'll use it to give me lift note ideas, and I'll go back and edit quite a bit. I'll use it on research almost exclusively, compared to Google. I'll if it points my way to a book, I'll read the book. But
Hmm.
man, do I love AI for research. I use it for image generation. I think Shutterstock is dead. I think they're useless. I think Grok AI is like, the images it generates are so incredible and funny. Like, I actually asked it to generate an image of Trump on Mount Rushmore for my birthright promo that I did with Rickards. And I actually went to Chat GPT first, and it wouldn't do it. It wouldn't do it. It's like, oh, we can't do that for a public figure. I'm like, come on,
Come
like,
on.
it's like, what a Karen. So I go over to Grok, and Grok's like, yep, sure. And of course, it botched it the first few times. And but the final rendering, it came out so good. I threw it in the promo. It gave me a picture of Trump's face on a dollar bill or something like that, and it looked like you could, it was engraved on there yesterday. It just looked so real. It's just,
Wow.
you couldn't go to an artist and get that, like, and or if you did, it would take a lot of money and a lot of time to get the right
Hmm.
artists lined up. But I think it's very freeing from a design perspective. You're thinking, man, I just need the right visually compelling image to make this point. I even used it to generate those images in Birthright of what the boom towns of the 19th and 20th century looked like before and after their kind of gold rushes or oil rushes. And those pictures, I mean, I don't have time. I don't have time to go through archives and dig up actual pictures, but Grok
Right.
served them up immediately. The other thing I'm using it for a lot is handling objections, right? So one of the biggest things about writing copy is if you don't handle objections, you fail because the reader or viewer sees it and has an unanswered objection you didn't take care of, and they're gone, they blow. So you could upload your entire script into one of these GPTs or Grok and just say like, I want you to give me 20 skeptical questions. So I used that for this Rickards promo, and I turned a bunch of those questions into the Q&A at the end.
Hmm.
And then I just riffed on the, with Jim on the answers. But it's great for speeding up that part of the process. I don't think it's good for idea creation at all yet, but I don't think it's very creative at all. I think it's just all knowing and
Right.
connected to all knowledge. I mean, if you or I had the ability to zap knowledge into our head, that we could write it as fast as Chat GPT. It's just that we don't. We rely on our frail memories, and we don't have any Wi-Fi. So, but it may get there someday, and who knows? Like, I'm open to having it help me co-write if we do get to that point. It'd be
Yeah.
crazy not to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. So let me switch gears here for a second because you mentioned the Q&A at the end. I have kind of this is one of my copy geeky things. The idea of these kind of like elements that you use um, in a promo, like that are like a Q&A or like an involvement device, or in a video, like TV like has there's a lot of things that they do on TV that the Nielsen ratings and kind of watching data has driven them to do, like the banners at the bottom that are telling you what's coming next in the video,
Mhm.
the teaser scripts or the teaser promos in the beginning, things like that. What kind of like stuff like that, these like kind of format things, Um, do you kind of include in promos that maybe other people don't a Q&A at the end for specific objections, or do you think about that kind of stuff? Um,
I sometimes do. I think I do it more on webinars because it just feels like that's part of the formula. Um, on the front end, I try to leverage curiosity as much as I can, and it's just more of a natural pacing and teasing that goes on rather than a call out, an explicit call out. I never said in this promo with Rickards that, oh, we're gonna have a Q&A at the end, or
mhm.
because I didn't want to call it out because it wasn't an actual live Q&A anyway. So I didn't want to
Right,
like
right.
I didn't want to mislead people about that. But although with webinars you can, because you if it's live, you could actually do that. It's great. But yeah, I think it could be. I think of it more of like a chain of like pulling somebody through and having one layer unfold after another. And I like having it slightly off kilter.
Mhm,
I think it's almost like there's different schools of thought when it comes to this, but since we're not exactly artists, it's like an art and a science. I think it has elements of both. And I like things a little bit off kilter. I like things to go wrong, or I like things to appear like somewhat odd, but not like what the heck is that? I'm out of here odd. It's more just like slightly incongruent, or just I want people to stop and wonder as they go through the copy. And that's sort of my own engagement device, is to
mhm,
try to get them to feel that way. So in this example we had with Jim, we talked about Trump's claim of building 10 new American cities, which I thought was fascinating. The moment he said it, it was very patriotic, and but also a strange thing to say because nobody ever does that. Like, what does that even mean?
mhm.
And it kind
Right.
of passed quickly in the news cycle a year or so ago. But then I thought about it, and got with Jim, and we talked about like the future and how it could, what could be the basis of these new cities? How could this actually happen? Or what if they had something to do with these vast untapped minerals lying on federal lands, which is where he wants to build the cities, on federal
Mhm,
lands. So it felt like a bit of a curveball, and Patrick McKelvey is the chief over at Paradigm, brought up a really good point when we read the section. He's like, yeah, this feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. I'm like, you're right, it kind of does. So based on his objection, I inserted a line in there saying like, when you hear this, it's probably going to sound like a little bit, crazy, or like it's not going to make any sense. But I promise it will in a minute. Just like I tried to, that's one way to answer an objection, is to just acknowledge it, even
mhm.
without answering it. Just acknowledge the fact that it's there. That way, people don't think, "Man, this guy's crazy." Like, no, no, no. There's a whole point to this. We're going to get to that. So if you kind of, like, you don't have to answer the objection. That would be awkward if I answered the objection there.
Right.
But if I simply acknowledge it, which I was so happy he brought that up, because that thought hadn't occurred to me, because I got so close to this project, like we always do in our
Yeah.
promo. But that's just another example there.
I like that phrasing too in general, because it's one of those things that it's kind of like a readership viewership sale. Like,
Mm,
you open a loop and, hey, you're gonna explain this in a minute. Just hold on. And so it's like, okay, now I'm sticking around just for that. Um, right. So I definitely like that. The idea of it, like, going to geeky mode again, of different ways to answer objections. I feel like there's some things that like uh cause natural objections, right? And some of those things you can remove instantly in the next sentence. And so like you're saying something like, hey, I like take like a really crass kind of straight up claim of like, you could turn $500 into $1 million, right? Theoretically. And then that's kind of that's bullshit. Um, kind of thing. So if you had that claim in there, not that you would do that anymore, probably from a legal, but like, let's say that this could happen, you would then follow that up, if you could, with an immediate proof element saying that this is true, even if you're going to come back to it later. But like, you understand that whenever you say something, there is a reaction that's going to happen. You hit it immediately before moving on, because you don't let objections pile up, right?
yes, yeah, yeah. There's so many ways to do that. You could do it by acknowledging the audacity of the claim. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could say like, I know that sounds crazy, because look, even if you took and you could pick out the highest flying stock there is, like even if you put that money into Nvidia at the start, you wouldn't be anywhere close to that. So you may be wondering like, what could possibly top that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and the right answer is like, you're probably never going to see that in your lifetime, except for maybe once or
Right.
twice. This just happens to be one of those opportunities. I'm going to explain why in a moment. So that's, in a way, it's like I'm not answering the objection. I'm just acknowledging. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm not trying to blow smoke here. I'm not just throwing big numbers at you to get you greedy and then take your credit card. Like, I'm going to explain everything before you have to make any decision whatsoever. So a bit of a more like armor on the shoulder, like I get you, you get me, like I'm not playing games here, like,
Yeah.
or you acknowledge how long it could take, like, I mean, depending on the nature of the investment. If it's crypto, maybe it's like an overnight, sensation. But if it's what if it's a way to do that in 20 years? Well, 20 years is a long time, but it's still pretty awesome return. So what if you could plant a seed right now that cost $500 and you knew in 20 years it'd be worth 1 million? Would that be boring to you? Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, most investors, they fall asleep when I talk like this because they want it tomorrow, but they're probably
That's
going to end up losing every penny. Like, you could say something like that that's a little more like stern and loving, like a stern, loving
yeah.
parent. Like,
Well, that's like that classic direct mail promo by Gary Bencivenga, get rich slowly. And it's like the exact opposite
yeah,
of what everyone else was saying. But it also is like feels very viscerally true when somebody says like you have to do it smart. Um,
yeah. Or you could say like, look, if it's a back end service and that's the pick, like you could say like, look, these are moonshots, and 8 out of 10 of them are going to be dead wrong. 8 out of 10 of these are going to lose your money. One or two of them are going to make up for everything and then some. Like, and then give an example of that. That's how, like, we've done that a million times at the VC set. So it's really just I don't mind, like, I mean, like, I don't mind being open and honest about that. It's actually stronger because when if you're the reader or the viewer and you're saying bullshit, then I'm like I'm acknowledging your call of BS right there. And I think the other thing to do, and you really just don't see a lot of guys do, is like too many guys use the I feel like I'm lecturing. This is crazy, but I feel like, but I'm doing it for a good reason. I want to help. So anyway, too many guys, I feel like they turn the anchor in these promos into a yes man slash cheerleader, and it's just sickening to me. I'll read it. I'll be like, this is not real. This never happens. This is not what a real interview sounds like. Have you watched a real interview?
right.
And I think the interviewer should represent the reader. The interviewer should be the most skeptical person on earth, and you will get to witness their conversion over the course of the script. Like, then, as the viewer is being converted, the interviewer on the screen is being converted. And that's what I try to do. If you look at the
Hmm.
script with Aaron Gensler, did an amazing job hosting. That's his role, and that he executed it flawlessly. And it's important because, like, if you're cheerleading or just agreeing with everything, or worse, inserting facts that support the case, why would an interviewer help somebody he's interviewing, like, by cheerleading him and saying, I know it's even better? Like, it's so fake. And I know the thing is, like, that doesn't mean it won't work at all. Like, I think if you're writing in the middle of a massive bull market or a hype cycle, the market's extremely forgiving. You can make lots of mistakes. I saw that even at Legacy in post 2020, when it was raining money with all the stimmy checks.
Right.
But that's not a normal environment. That's not a normal environment. You can't get away with that at a time like this.
And to your earlier point, that skill gap is one of those things there. Just because you made some money, you could have made a lot more money. Just because you made some royalties, you could have made a lot more royalties.
Sure. Yeah.
Do it
Oh
better.
yeah. And feel better about it. Like, I want to be able to send my promos to, which I do. I send them to my dad. I send them to friends. My uncle even bought. He was like, I'm going to sign up for this newsletter. I'm like, cool. Like, is it worth it? I'm like, is this for real? He's asking. I'm like, yeah, Jim Rickards is amazing, man. He's one of a kind.
Yeah.
You're gonna love this newsletter. I love this newsletter. So I won't write for anything I don't believe in, and then I won't write it unless I feel like I could send it to friends and family. My best friend bought too. I sent him the link. He ended up. He's like, oh man, Jim Rickards sounds pretty interesting. Man, he's the real deal. Like, man, I can't believe you've never heard of him before. But uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's what you want. You don't want to have to like hide what you've written. Um, and a lot of that cringe copy where it's just like so on the nose, it's just like, oh God, here comes the carnival barker again. Like,
Hmm.
stop it, just stop it. It does way more harm than good over time. I think it pushes away more customers than it attracts. So even if you do succeed, you're attracting a bunch of desperate loonies who are not going to be around for much longer. Why? I don't
Hmm.
want to do business with desperate loonies. I want to do business with people who are more like us, who are inquisitive, curious about the world, have some money to spend, and I really want to know. They really, like, they're curious. They want to understand how those dots connect. Those to me are going to be best customers, like, not
Right.
the life wrap grabbers, like the pill poppers and life wrap grabbers, they call them. I think that's Dan Kennedy lineup.
Yeah, yeah. Is that pretty much the problem that you were mentioning earlier when somebody's writing something, you're like, this is this is a terrible customer you're writing to. This is an idiot. It's like
Yeah.
because you're just so on the nose, you're so like trying
Mm.
to promise the moon and like well, not misrepresent, but just hit the highlights only without like any depth to it. Uh,
Oh, yeah, it kills me. And it could work. There's some guys, I won't mention names, but there's some guys in the business who've been very successful in
mhm.
that line. And it's a free country. It's not like, I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed to do it. I mean, if that works for them, fine. But I just feel better about our business and the future of the business if we're not doing that. And I would never want that to become the standard. I'm a libertarian at heart. I don't want to control anybody, but it's just, I just don't want to read that. And I don't want to write that way. To me, it just makes my stomach turn. And, because it's not just about getting the sale. We're building an empire. We're building a relationship. We're building a connection. We're laying the ground for the next step to be taken. We're not just rolling into town, selling our snake oil, and then rolling out. And there's actually
Right.
a story to that in Charlotte, locally here where I'm at. I was taking a tour the other day, and there's this beautiful brick home in the center of the city, and this guy who built it was peddling a hair tonic that he said would regrow men's hair and eliminate women's wrinkles. And he was there for about 6 months, and he made so much money, he was able to build this mansion right in the center of town. But then, of course, 6 months passed, and all the bald guys like me didn't have any hair, and the women were still like, oh, had a still resting bitch face, and so he was run out of town, and probably had to go and do it somewhere else. So it's just, and that's not. I don't want that lifestyle or legacy. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And I think people sometimes, well, I don't know if it's a conscious decision or if it's just the way they're wired, or if it's just money. It's not a connection to them, but I love this business way too much to write that way, and I don't want to read it
Mhm.
anyway. So if I wouldn't want to eat, I wouldn't cook food that was like loaded in seed oils and like saturated fat and like covered in sugar. I'm not eating that. I wouldn't serve it to anybody else either. So I kind of think of it the same way in the business. I wouldn't prepare an experience for the reader that's going to mislead them or obscure a key part of the story or lead to an inevitable letdown, down the
Right.
line. And I wouldn't want to write to somebody who's not the avatar, not the type of person I'd want to hang out with or, connect with in an event, or somebody who may not have the funds to even become a lifelong customer. Although they could work their way up. I mean, if they're just starting out, but yeah, I think those are questions that don't get asked often enough. And
Mhm.
because it's hard to measure, it's almost impossible to measure their impact, where it's easy to measure the result of a sale. And
Right.
so we tend to lean towards what's easiest to measure and use those metrics to guide the entire business. But then there's hard to understand, hard to fathom metrics that you'll never pin down, but they could
Mhm.
matter a great deal. So it's really more about the spirit in which you approach it,
Yeah.
with good faith.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I guess we're up on an hour, so I don't want to take too long here, but I do want to end with one quick thing, which is you mentioned before we started talking an opportunity that like if I was a young copywriter, a junior copywriter, I would kill for. And this is, I mean, I literally picked up, sold my house. My wife quit her job to take an opportunity just like this, which was how I got in the industry. Was I was a junior writer. Clayton Makepeace had a conference. He had a competition. I won the competition for a promo I wrote, and then did a little bit of work. And then he calls me up like 6 7 months later, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to hire a full time writer here, a junior. I'm going to pay you
Mm,
peanuts. You're going to come here. You're going to learn every. Just as you get good, you're going to leave me and go off and make six figures, which is what I did, right out of But you're going to learn more in the first 2 years and of being here in person than you ever would any other way. And I did. I sold my house. My wife
mm.
quit her job. We moved to North
Wow.
Carolina, and if it wasn't for that, like I never would have had like the huge string of winners that I had that then
Mm,
led me to starting FMS and got me into the industry and really like started my career. And
mm.
so you are literally kind of looking for somebody like that right now to come work with you in person in North Carolina. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I built this agency. We call ourselves FK7, which is kind of fun. It sounds like a Mission Impossible, group like an or elite Navy SEALs, but it's really an homage to the Flesh Kincaid score FK7. We try to write at that seventh grade level. Um, so anyway, yeah, I have a bunch of really seasoned, talented guys on my team, but I have an abundance of ideas. They have abundance of ideas. I can't force multiply. My team's not big enough, so I'm looking to grow my team over the long term. But what I'm really looking for is for one supremely talented junior who's got some experience and a lot of upside to come live in this area with me, work at least a few days a week, in person, and just soak up, whatever mad ramblings I have to share. I'm approaching 50. I have a lot of ramblings. My ramblings are flowing over. So I think that just comes with age. Hopefully some of them are useful, but but yeah, I want somebody. I need somebody actually for to actually for two reasons. Like really, just to help me force multiply my ideas. And I do miss teaching and coaching. And you don't really get to do that with your senior guys because they've already kind of they figured it out
Hmm.
and they have their own styles. Why would I miss
Right.
them? But I'm also thinking about the future. Like, how do we grow? Like, I want my dream has always been to find the next me or the next better than me would be even better. Um, and I've found a couple of those guys in my career. I'm extremely excited to work with them and help develop them. And I'm proud of them. And but they're also extremely useful to me along the way. They put some money in my pocket as a copy chief as well, of course. But yeah, I'd love to have somebody local or somebody who can move here and spend at least a year or two. And the way I want to get into that is maybe like do a one-off contract with a few people if there are any candidates. We work together on a project, we see how it goes, and then if it goes really well and we hit it off on the right foot, then we can talk details about what comes next for next year. So I'd love it, and thank you for helping me put that message out there
Yeah.
because it's important. I'm not like, and this is not a class. I can't hire a whole class like I did in the past. I don't have the bandwidth, but the right guy or gal who wants to step up and show me what they got, I'm all ears.
I mean, that's a like anyone who's listening who is serious about like moving into the copy in this industry in a real serious way, like that's has to seriously consider that just because that's a career making kind of experience. For sure. Because I think about like the like we were talking earlier, like the intangible things that you learn working in person with somebody who's working, the way that you get to see, especially with someone like you as a chief, working with lots of different promos and ideas and lots of different gurus. You're going to get into the business in all kinds of interesting ways and learn things you wouldn't learn just from like studying copy by itself. um, Relationship building with people in the industry, like there's nothing more valuable outside of your skills than your network when it comes to your career, and like building an actual network of people in the industry that way, like it's just invaluable. So anyone who's serious about the industry, who's listening, who's maybe thinking like, hey, I'd love to do this, like I would say reach out to Patrick. How would somebody do that?
Oh, pbove at theagora.com. So my
There we
first
go.
initial last name, pbove at theagora.com. So yeah,
Perfect.
I'll be looking, I'll be checking those emails. We'll see who's out there. I know there's a lot of talent in your audience, and it's just a question of who's got the guts to do what you did when you were younger to go work with Clayton. You know, it makes
it's a
all the
big
difference in the world. And
it's a big
I got
risk.
that. It is a big
Yeah.
risk, and especially if you have a family, I mean, it's even harder. But it's got to be in person. That's the only way to do it. You can't do
Mm-hmm.
this remote when you're starting out. And that's what I got out of Palmer when I went to Stansbury back in 2011. I planted myself right next to him. I listened to every conversation he had. I took advantage of every opportunity to have him look over my copy, and I absorbed as much as I could of his wisdom and brilliance. So, and it's worked out well. I can't imagine not having access to him at that point in my
Yeah.
life. You know, it was just like he's an incredible guy and copywriter. So it's just and he's trained infinite, like seems like seemingly infinite number of pros. So that's really the best way to learn. It's not from a course, it's not from a book, it's from being in the trenches with a chief who cares, who's going to shower you with attention, and you're going to work your ass off to help them. You know, and then you help each other. And
Yeah.
that's the only way I've seen it work in this business. That's you either go all the way or you don't go at all. You know, like you go all in or you're just not serious about it and you're hobbyist. That's fine. You know, have fun. But
Yeah.
the best riders will make that sacrifice and go. And people have moved to war zones like Baltimore, you know, like for years just to get exposed to all these talented copywriters who are there.
Yeah.
And but it was worth it, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
nobody died and everybody came out richer and happier, you know. So and Charlotte's lovely. So I don't know. It's a very mild
Charlotte's
winter,
fantastic. It's
lower
a
cost of
fantastic
living than
town.
Florida. Yeah, there you go. Thanks for the endorsement.
No, it is. It's a great town, great food town, great like beaches. Like just a great town, uh, for real. So awesome. Well, thanks, man. This is always great to talk to you. And yeah, anyone who's listening, like pay attention. Maybe give Patrick an email if you're a copywriter. Uh, and yeah, thanks, man.
It was fun, John. Always great to talk to you. I enjoy these chats. We should definitely keep them up once or
Yeah,
twice a year at bare minimum.
I appreciate it. Thanks. All right, take
All
care.
right, man. Bye.